Thanks for that, Ryan. And after all this time in lockdown and social distancing, even the most extroverted among us might feel a little socially awkward right now. So joining us to discuss the psychology behind why we've lost our social skills is Dr. Tracy Bennett. She's the founder of Get Kids Internet Safe. Thank you so much for being here. So we've spent so much time alone over this past year, probably more than at any other point in our lives. So how has isolation affected our relationships, our ability to have an actual, conversation with someone?
Well, I mean, it's too soon for research to come in, but I think common sense plays a role here, right? I think that a lot of us were spending a lot of our time Zooming in with friends and family, spending a lot of time in chat rooms and on social media. And I think a lot of our online behaviors have spilled into our offline behaviors.
That's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people would say that social media and Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, played a role in helping them feel connected. I actually had a dream at one point during the pandemic. I was at a party with people from Twitter who I'd never met in real life. I mean, I was like, this is definitely a manifestation of how my year has gone.
Yeah. When I did research for my book, Screen Time in the Meantime, and I found that teenagers who spend a lot of time online got used to trying on different skins and different identities in social media and in gaming. And as a result, they brought a lot of that experimentation into their real lives, to the surprise of parents. And now I think the parents are catching up. Now we're behaving sometimes as if we're on social media. Instead of taking turns and listening and say, hey, what do you think? A lot of times people get in front of others and then just kind of post their opinions. They're telling instead of taking turns and listening. And it makes sense because oftentimes online, it's the loudest voices that stand out. And those have been our models over the last year.
That is really interesting and quite possibly the most frightening thing I've heard all day. The last thing we need is the real world to be more like the social media world. So does that mean the answer to all of this is remembering to be an active listener when you're talking to someone?
I think people need to be a little more deliberate and maybe even cut down on some of their coping mechanisms that we used during COVID, like too much wine and listening to conspiracy theorists. Right? At this point now, we need to interact with each other and gather data as well as share our data. And, I think we've been wearing masks. So our nonverbal cues have been hidden. And we need to take that into account and make sure and verbally check in about the things that we can't see because of our masks.
Yeah, it's really interesting because at the very beginning of the pandemic, I remember interviewing a therapist who was already warning that once we all emerge from isolation, that things are going to get wild, that people are going to they've all this pent up energy. And like you said, maybe people have been drinking or imbibing more to kind of cope with all the pandemic. And then the bars are going to open up and it's just going to be, people are calling it the roaring 20s, but there's negative and positive connotations to that. So, what's your number one goal to help people, or a piece of advice to help people cope as they're getting ready to kind of get back out there in a very real way?
Well, I offer online courses for parents and online coaching as the founder of Get Kids Internet Safe. And, one of the number one advice points I give is that you just have to set an intention before you walk into a place. So when you hit the crowds for the first time, take a moment before you walk in and remind yourself that you're there to share information back and forth rather than just present yourself to an audience.
Yeah, and I would also say allow for more time because even here in the newsroom, all the reporters, we've still been out there interviewing people, and we've learned to pencil in an extra half an hour to an hour for a shoot because a lot of the times we're the first human contact someone has had in a while, and they just want to enjoy getting some things off their chest for the first time.
Yeah, in psychology, we call that urgency, right? We have this sense of urgency as if it's going to be taken away from us at any time. But now is the time to sit back, have gratitude that things are getting back to normal, and give ourselves a little grace until we get used to it again.
All right. Well, I have so much gratitude for you being here, Dr. Bennett. Thank you for the great advice.
Thanks so much for having me.